Welcome back to Are You Tired of This Shit? And hopefully by now everyone's worked out their mirror a little bit and had an honest discussion about they ought to do something about this in the mirror, and asking yourself and, get a few friends in the mirror and say, are you tired of this shit? So today we're gonna cover the French Quarter. And for those, just to remind everybody, not every city has a French Quarter. We're the only city in the United States that has anything close to it or like it. People from all over the world come to New Orleans, and they come to see the French Quarter. I mean, even people who don't often go to the French Quarter on vacations or conventions, they come to New Orleans because of the French Quarter. French Quarter is this little special little few blocks, whatever it is, 5 or 6 by 12 blocks. I did live in the French Quarter for 5 years. I had a house there when I moved here full time right after Hurricane Katrina, and it was a very special place. It was in living in the French Quarter after Katrina, where I realized that New Orleans could be an urban paradise with our cultural gems if we just got a few things straight. We still can be. It's a longer way to go now. We unfortunately blew a lot of resources in the post-Katrina period where we could have reinvented ourselves. But again, our outcomes are what I'm talking about, and our outcomes haven't changed, in the post-Katrina period from our political process. And to be honest, it totally sucks. It really does. And we've had all kinds of bullgas from politicians saying how great things are and what a good job they did, and I just don't agree. You can't deny the outcomes that we have, and until relatively recently, the French Quarter was a dump. I had friends who just wouldn't go there. Certainly my Bayou friends from down the Bayou, they go to Kenner's about as far as they would go. They just didn't want to do it, and a lot of people. A lot of real New Orleanians quit going to the French Quarter. Didn't want to park your car. You couldn't find a spot because all the illegal parking, all the lawlessness, the total violation of codes, of laws. It was a little wacky for such a special gem. So today we're going to hear from Glade Bilby. Glade is a tireless advocate of the French Quarter. He works hard. He's been living there almost 40 years, I think 40 years in the French Quarter, and he's been taking care of an old house built in 1834, which requires a lot of sweat. He paints it, he does woodwork, he does all this stuff himself. He should get, everyone with an old house in the French Quarter should get a stipend from the city. Think about it. If Disney owned the French Quarter, it'd be a whole lot better off, and they'd be paying these people to take care of these old houses. So again, Glade's been doing it a long time, knows a lot more about it than I do. He's on all various organizations. You'll hear about it. Let's hear from him on what we could do or somehow try to get better outcomes in terms of this valuable gem. So take a listen. Welcome, and thanks for coming on, and welcome to the Are You Tired of This Shit podcast. My goal is to get bleeped a lot in my own podcast. I know you're tired of this shit, okay? You don't have to say it. I'll say it for you, but you can say it for yourself. So look, our goal here is we want to get the word out and get the right questions out there for this next election. And, I'm looking at the ones that have to do with operations of the city, the mayor and the 5 council and the 2 at-large seats. And it's going to be my goal to interview all the candidates once we know who they all are. We'll do that after July. So the whole premise of this is that we seem to have the same outcomes no matter who's in office. So let's not focus on the particular politicians. Let's focus on the processes that give us the outcomes. And the only way, my premise, the way I see it, is that we have political outcomes where the outcome is to get elected again, stay in office. and we don't really have a focus on real world outcomes. And you are right at the scene of where a lot of that's happening. You've been in the French Quarter almost 50 years. I've known you for almost 20. I think my wife's known you for almost 50 years. So, and you and I talk a lot about issues with the city, and I've heard from you that the proper outcomes are very hard to get. It's not like they're just flowing. Um, so, um, so I guess what is and what's the importance of the French Quarter? Okay, and because I know a politician might say, well, there's not many people that vote, and so what, but the French Quarter plays way above its weight, and so just kind of remind. People who are interested in different outcomes for the city. What does the French Quarter mean exactly?
Well, thank you for inviting me to come on. I think that the French Quarter is uniquely situated in the world and in the country as New Orleans. They kind of go together. But more importantly than that, we have an enormous economic impact on this region, certainly on the city. When you think about how much money we bring in sales tax alone, it's over $150 million a year in sales tax alone. Now that's split between the state and the city, but that's considerable for this small geographic area that we call the French Quarter. And I'm going to ask you one question, and I think this is good. My wife brought this up. Would you come to New Orleans if there wasn't a French Quarter? That's a serious question to ask yourself, because I don't know that many people would. And I think we become the magnet, we became the draw. And you're right when you mention that we don't have a lot of voters, because we don't. Our district is Council District C, which is largely made up of Algiers on the other side of the river, which you know well. And I think because of that, we just frankly don't have the voters to elect separate representation for the French Quarter. And going deeper into this, the French Quarter is unique. We have a unique culture. We have a unique demographic here in the French Quarter. And I think we do ourselves a disservice by not having our own representation for the French Quarter. I know it would be close to impossible with the bureaucracy that there is today to carve out just the French Quarter, but we maybe need a different way to look at the French Quarter as opposed to District C, which is way larger than the geographic confines of the French Quarter.
Is there a way to carve out a logical district, French Quarter and CBD, with enough people to have critical mass for a district?
Well, I don't think we're going to have enough critical mass in terms of voters, but we certainly would if you have the economic impact of it and what it means to the city. Because I'm a commissioner of French Quarter Management District, and one of the things that I got okayed, although we haven't done it yet, was a French Quarter economic impact study, just to show what the French Quarter is worth to the city and the region. Because when you think about it, you come to the French Quarter and you go to somewhere on Bourbon Street, Royal Street, Charter Street. There's a lot of things that supply that location, that business, whether it's liquor, food, antiques. A lot of employees don't live here, so they come from somewhere else. Linen cleaning comes from somewhere else. You have to take into consideration the people that the landings and takeoff at the airport. That's French Quarter related. Our last Super Bowl had a tremendous amount of impact that came in, but they were corporate. They didn't really translate down to the average business that I talked to owners. So that was a little different animal, but it certainly brought tons of attention worldwide, internationally to us.
Well, let's talk about what's at stake. And I want to mention tipping points at a point where something gets so bad you can't save it. I have a lot of friends, several, who say without the French Quarter, I think it's clear New Orleans wouldn't be what it is. If there was a failure of the French Quarter, it could be a failure of New Orleans, and that goes to the whole state. And I don't know if they're being overly dramatic, but it's an example of tipping points. But another tipping point. If you could talk about how many people lived in the French Quarter 20 years ago, how many live in the French Quarter now, and let's say the ones living now, if half of those people left, Um, the other half's going to follow pretty quickly, I think, So, and again, it's not, we want to be positive. We want to look at our best potential future, but there's a lot at risk, is why I think we have to pay attention. So let's talk about, what do you think about tipping points?
Well, I certainly think that we do have less residents in the quarter than we had 10, 20, 30 years ago. That's statistical. We know that.
What's
Uh,
your best guess? How many are there now?
I think there's a little over 2,000, maybe closer to 3,000, but actually I think there's less than that because there's only about 1,800 voters that have their voter registration in the French
Mm,
Quarter. But we had 7,000 40 years ago. We had a lot of people a long time ago. It's truly America's most historic neighborhood, and people forget that we're a neighborhood. You come in town and you drink and you eat and you roam around, but there's still people that live here, and I think that's one of the frustrations that we have as far as residents. And then some years ago, I would maybe say 25, 30 years ago, all these larger buildings, these larger places that were single family homes originally became apartments, but then they became condominiums. So people would buy a condo and you lost the neighborhood. When a building on the corner had 4 apartments and you had 4 neighbors that lived there, and now is nobody lives there because it's 4 condos and people
mm,
there sporadically. That's kind of problematic because you don't have the vested interest that you would if somebody who actually lived in the quarter full time, like I have. Um, uh, then the tipping point, I think, um, that's going to be hard to define, Laney, because we still have committed residents. We still have people who are here taking care of the infrastructure. And if we didn't have the residents here taking care of the architecture, the old buildings, my building's built in 1834, so we're close to 200 years old. It's constant upkeep on these old buildings. And when you have all the burdens of 18 million tourists and the infrastructure burdens that puts on the infrastructure, the streets, the buildings, you really need people who are passionate, that want to take care of the properties. If all the residents left, what would you have to sell in New Orleans? It's certainly, I think they missed the boat by not really focusing on the culture that's reflected in the architecture and the history reflected in the in the architecture. So it's the residents who are really doing a yeoman's job of keeping what the city is selling in the forefront.
yeah. Well, I know you go through a lot, and it seems like the city should give you an award for what it costs to maintain part of the important show. And then when you talk about visitors not recognized in the community, I think it was Super Bowl night, someone pooped on your step. So, and you sure it wasn't dog poop. So, hence our title, Are You Tired of This Shit? So I guess you have some literal shit to be tired of. But talk a little bit about, if you could have the ideal council person in the future, or just hypothetical. I'd like to know, with regards to the French Quarter, and creating value for the city, because I believe that we can create a high value hospitality service industry, and not a relatively inexpensive one like we have now. Because you and I travel to other places, and it's not cheap to go to a nice, cool place that's the equivalent of French Quarter, even though it's hard to find an equivalent. There's none in the United States. We have to go to Europe to find something. So what's the potential like? Because we want to get questions in front of candidates, and we want to focus on outcomes and not inputs. So could you describe? And everybody's running for office. So let's describe the ideal council person for outcomes, and then we can talk about the ideal mayor for outcomes.
Well, okay, so that's a big question
Yeah,
that
it
you.
is.
I think ideally we want to sell the history. We want to sell the culture, and that's reflected here in the French Quarter through the architecture. Okay, it's the people are great. I got to say that. I'll start. We have outstanding people in New Orleans. We absolutely do. That care, that are friendly, that enjoy tourists
Mhm.
coming. But we don't have the focus of selling what we have best, the architecture, the history, the culture. And I think if I had a council person, I think that they would want to protect that as much as possible. And you can do that by paying attention to zoning, comprehensive zoning ordinance, pay attention to some of the illegal things that go on. I've often complained that we don't have enforcement in anything, whether it's parking, signage, building, selling stuff on the street, setting up in the front of my house with a barbecue pit and selling things with no permits, no taxation, no health department regulations. That's problematic. So you really need to kind of funnel things so we have a little more compliance. And I would love to see that happen in any council person. Now, protecting the integrity of the architecture would be a really big thing if we could have that happen. And it would basically by following the zoning laws, don't overrule Board of Zoning Adjustments, don't overrule the City Planning Commission, don't overrule and make exceptions for the View Carré Commission. Sometimes they may be a little bit out there in terms of how you can paint your house this color or that color. But if you just let everything go, it would be wild, wild west in the French Quarter. I mean, people doing everything. So I think somebody who had a little more focus on getting the compliance level up would be to all of our benefit. So that would be the first thing. And then let's talk overall about politicians. I think that we have a lack of accountability. Okay. And I think that I've often advocated for, hey, let's have an incentive program built in so you just don't get paid for doing whatever or doing nothing. But if you do better, you get more money. If you do worse, you're gone. And I think that would be something that we could look at. An incentive program for politicians. Think that one through. That would be pretty.
I think it would be an annual recall election where the annual we can decide to recall them or not.
Yeah, that would be interesting. But as we saw in the last recall, it'd be really hard to do. But I think some sort of accountability where you have to meet some goals. Can we go into the sanitation contract, which is sort of important right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's it has to do with the operations of the city,
right?
And it has to do with politically run versus professionally run. It has to do with political outcomes and not the real world outcomes. It's all things that we're going to be talking about, and the concept of best value, which is, but we can, I think, but is there a quick summary? Because I think people know about that. I don't know if we're going to repeat what's in the news, but is there something? What's the takeaway from the sanitation contract? It's still in court right now, right?
Well, one thing that stuck out to me when this RFP came out last year for the sanitation contract for Service District 5, which includes the DD, there was nothing in there that talked about the effectiveness of the job, the quality of the job. And that's one of the things that we've been railing against with the previous contractor, that they didn't really do a good job. For instance, I'll say my house, they're supposed to clean once a month in the street. They would come by 90 seconds, clean my entire block. That's impossible to do. So read through the contract, there was nothing in there. It talked about force majeure and DBE and other things, termination for cause or not cause, and certain employment things, but nothing about the quality of the work. So what we're doing is at French Quarter Management District is we're putting together a list of standards we want to see in the next contract that comes up. This isn't going, and the reason why, because the current contractor, IV Waste, set the bar high. He's doing a fantastic job for the French Quarter. It's noticeable. People see it. They talk to everybody about how nice the French Quarter looks. I've never had so many good comments. Certainly during Jazz Fest, people say, "Oh, the French Quarter looks great," and it's noticeable. So when you set the bar and show that it can be done, we need to ensure that it will be done. Whoever contract going.
Well, let's see. Look, I can tell you honestly, before the current contractor, French Quarter was a dump. It was a dump everywhere. There's no nice way of saying it. So it's some of the shit we tired of, but so so you should ask whoever's running, are they willing to, we should ask all the candidates for city, are they willing to adhere to performance standards and outcomes? Because it's about more than the French Quarter trash. I think that's an analogy for the political process where political outcomes, and political outcomes mean the right certain people have to get the contracts. It also means they're gatekeepers. If you want to get some, you got to go see this person. You remember when we had Frankie and Johnny's furniture, and we had to go see the special man. Okay, that was yeah, let them have it. And I mean, that's a nice, good. That's an example of a gatekeeper. But why does the city need gatekeepers? We should have policy versus politics and separate them, and every level of government. But in New Orleans, we don't. All we have is political outcomes. Is why we have the same outcomes. It's why we have 20% voter turnout. And I agree with the voters because they say no matter what we do, nothing changes. And they're absolutely right. They're absolutely right. When you look
Well,
how far we are from our potential.
well, and I think a lot of the result of that is when a tax or a bond issue or something comes up, people go, no. They just say no,
Yes.
the bat,
Yeah.
because they're pretty much ensured that the money's not going to be spent well. And I think people don't mind paying for things. People don't mind paying taxes if it's used properly. And we're not seeing basic city services delivered to us
Yeah.
on the board, not just the French Quarter. We have a little more focus on it because the spotlight is on us here. And certainly after the event of January 1st, law enforcement security has been top of mind for everyone. But
Yeah.
I think people are tired of not getting basic services, road fixed, water fixed, leaks all the time. And I'll give you one other example. One of the things we were trying to do in the French Quarter is get the lights lit, because at some point there were 33% of the lights in the French Quarter.
Yeah.
And that's the safety and security, and make people feel good. Whether or not you can get banged on the head in a well-lit place or in a dark alley, that doesn't matter. But you need to look like you care. So we wanted it well clean. So we've got it clean. It took 3 years, Laney, for us to get a contract going and get the city to fund $1.7 million to fix the remainder of the lights. Now, they're not all fixed yet, but it took 3 years to do something that you would think would be a natural to do and that they want to do.
Right.
So I think, to get back to your politics question, bureaucracy begets bureaucracy. And having dealt with this for a number of years now, I see that some people just go, forget it. I don't want to do this. It just gets so dead end and kick the can down the road that people don't see results happening. And we're used to results happening in your business, our home. Everybody has to take care
Yeah.
of it. You
But
can't. Yeah.
we're not used to results in the city from the government. So how about the concept that those of us who live there, the city belongs to us. We pay the taxes. The city doesn't really create anything. They just get money that we've paid in taxes to the federal, state, or local government, and supposed to use it for our benefit. But it's part of the culture. Again, I'm not pointing to any specific politician.
Right.
It's part of the culture to run things politically. And there's a political class. There's maybe 100, maybe all the leaderships, maybe 100, 150 people. And there's a political class that are doing quite well. Their outcomes are great. They have jobs. They have positions of power. I'm aware of people who just don't necessarily make a lot of money, just like to have power and control things. But in other cities where there's more wealth, it may be a growing population and more wealth and more big companies, this looks better than it is in a poor city like New Orleans. The things that concern me is that we're becoming more like a third world country. A lot of successful up and coming people go, we have a giant middle class there in Atlanta and DC and other places, and you can't blame them. So we have people who, unfortunately, they can't afford to leave. And there are people, which I count myself in, who just really want to be there, but could be anywhere. So, but yet we have this, this draw to New Orleans that we just can't get rid of, and we just want it to fulfill its potential. So it's about how do we get the issues up in front of the main media? How do we get the voters to demand outcomes? And how do we get rid of everything being run politically and run things professionally? So to me, if I had to describe my ideal mayor would not be running for the second term the first day to get in. Okay. They would hire a professional administrator from the business world to handle the business side of the city, and they would leave them alone. They would get rid of gatekeepers where you got to go, oh, you want to do that? You got to go see this person. Okay. They would take the sewage and water board and run it professionally. And I don't mean privatize it, just not run it politically. Just have it. It's 1,200 people. It's not that many votes, but it's a whole lot of influence, a lot of contracts, a lot of political stuff. And we're not going to get the right outcomes running things politically because someone who doesn't have a business background, who's only done politics, they don't know if who they hire is bullshitting them or not. And speaking of bullshit, I'm naming it. This first time on the podcast. It's called bull gas. It's a combination of bullshitting and gaslighting. And like I said before, it's a good thing it's not flammable, or we would have blown up a long time ago. And the voters should be tired of this. So I know it's a bit of a rant, and I'm going to probably do it some more in this podcast. But you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know about gatekeepers. You know about elected people who are owned by somebody else who we didn't elect. And there's not just one case. And it's happened, as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
How do we get out of that?
I don't know what your feeling about term limits are, but maybe it should just be one term. I kind of said something to that effect about the presidential election. Instead of 4 years, you get in, you start running for the next 4. Just make it 1 6-year term. You're done. And I think you'd be more effective on a local level as well. But again, you have to have some accountability built into it, and nothing has accountability built into it.
Yeah.
Political families, that's all they've done is politics. They've never run a business. They've never had employees. You step into an office as a senator or something, and you've got a giant budget. You can hire all kinds of people that your friends are. And they can write things that are advantageous to your friends, whether it's an airport, a road project, or a cleaning contract, and there's no say so as to how good the job should be or what is the value for the people paying for it, us taxpayers. I mean, I look at the property tax we pay in the French Quarter, and why so much property tax here when we're attracting what you're selling? So if it wasn't for us, you'd be just limited to big ass beers to sell. And so I think you're going to get a more apathetic voter because it's been going on so long. And I think that's going to be one of the problems going forward. We can ask for more. We can actually demand more. We can write in more. And I know I've never written so many letters about issues than I do in the past 3 years about things. And fortunately, some of them get heard and some of them get considered. But I think until we have accountability built in some function, maybe everything's about the money. So maybe if it was a budgetary thing, you have $100 to spend. If you spend 110, you're going to be docked 10. If you spend 90, we'll split it with you. So maybe there's something to an incentive program built into everything. Because now, if you don't have to pay for it, hey, sign the check, give it to somebody, and let it get done. And if it costs more, nothing happens. It costs more. It takes longer. So what? So I think.
But I don't know how to do accountability. You can't embarrass. You can't not embarrass the New Orleans politicians. The media can't. They're unembarrassable. And it's, again, I'm not blaming the people. It's the people around them. It's like spiders and glue and an octopus that just hold everything in place. They don't want anything to change because they're doing quite well.
And when we elect a guy with $90,000 in cold cash in his freezer, that's on the voters.
Let's not pick on anybody in particular.
No, I'm not. Right now, we have 2 convicted felons running from big offices, not just little people or something. So, I mean, people can't keep electing these folks who have issues that bring a bad focus to what we're trying to do, what we should be trying to do. Let's put it like that. And I mean, and we want more. We're as what did the poet say? We're not as good as we could be, but better than we think we are. So I
Well,
think look at that.
Well, can we get? Will we ever? First of all, I think the balance of power still needs to move toward more to the council and away from the mayor. I think we need to be more like the surrounding parishes. Will we ever get a mayor willing to give up political power for the benefit of the citizens of New Orleans? That's the question that needs to be asked. And what I mean by that is quit running things politically. And a big example, I love is Sewage and Water Board. That needs to be run like the port. It needs to be run with a board that has really real power and authority of professionals that know the subject matter, that are so-called above politics, where they don't really not looking for a job or a friend for a job. They're either grown-ups or retired people who just care about the city. And until we get that, we're not going to get proper outcomes. And the Sewage and Water Board floods a lot of people back into poverty. It's responsible for the potholes. It's not really the streets department. And, I'll be talking more about that. But tell me about your experience with the city, with Public Works, with, about doing things for the French Quarter. You got some lipstick for the Super Bowl, and that was done in a hurry and not all just right, et cetera. So let's talk about outcomes again.
One particular instance, the director of Public Works came and spoke to French Quarter Management District at one of the board meetings and talked about, let's just talk overlay of the streets, because all our streets were not in great shape. So they wanted them to look good. So we've had a giant problem with flooding since they did the streetcar on Rampart Street, because it kind of crowned up and it trapped things in water. Things that never flooded sort of flood with heavy rains, and it's been an issue. And if you don't continue to clean the catch basins, it will flood. That goes without saying. As soon as you put a stopper in the drain, the water has nowhere to go. So one of my questions was, when you cut down the top of the street and overlay, tell me about it. And he said, we're going to mill down 3 inches and go up 2. And I said, okay, at least he has an understanding of what it is. So I come out of one of the meetings, I see the street. I mean, I put my camera down on the curb. I couldn't see the curb across because the street was higher in the middle. I said, you're causing a problem. And I talked to one of the guys. He said, what are you doing? He says, we're going down about 2 inches and come up a little more than 2 inches. So it was exactly what I didn't want to have happen, or I thought we could avoid. And so then they start doing Charter Street. 9 years charter from Jackson Square to Esplanade would kill your car, basically. And so I'm delighted they're doing it. And I went there with a level, Lainey, I mean, you'll appreciate this, and put my level down on the curb and the street, and they were even. So the water would just go right into the sidewalk. So it's like I sent a note out, and they stopped construction for about 10 days. But then when they started back, they did exactly what they were doing before.
Same thing.
Yeah. But the deal was, why can you do this whole street in 3 days? And it was 9 years. 9 years to do this. I mean,
it was it was the right political outcome.
Yeah, it looked good for the Super Bowl, for the football game. I hesitate calling it Super Bowl. I just refer to it as the football game. But we did look good, and we did shine up very nicely. So the deal is now, can we continue that momentum? Do we have the will to do those things that we did to look good and keep us good? I see it fraying around the edges, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk one little, I guess, a last topic we can cover. This has been good. We Super Bowl people did say they would more favorably consider coming back if we could improve our hotel stock a little bit. We have some aging hotel rooms, basically, and look, it's the hotel owners. They have to risk capital. They have to make investments, and you need to be making some money to renovate your hotels, and so it's about a value building cycle, and I think the city's been on a value destruction cycle. Okay, and I think the way to make hospitality people make more money is to fix the streets and put the lights on and, just do value creation. So can you talk a little bit about, I don't think there's any acknowledgement from the political mechanism in our city about value creation. Even though the pie's getting smaller, their piece of it's fine, you know. So can you talk a little bit about that, how you see the city could create value if it was functioning, period?
Well, there's a couple of things there that you touched on. I mean, let's look at short-term rentals for one thing. I think the proliferation of short-term rentals has really hurt the hotel industry. It's
Mhm.
gentrified neighborhoods, and when we have a largely service-based economy, you need people that can get to and from their work. And when you price them out of the neighborhoods close to the French Quarter, let's just say in Tremé and in the Bywater and Faubourg Marigny, which are basically right across the street from me, you make it more difficult. And when you have unreliable public transportation, you make it more difficult for those employees. Then it puts a disadvantage to the hotel industry because you're having unregulated, unlicensed, uninspected, on safety issues. I'm sure most of the people's insurance did not allow them to be commercial entities, and this affects the hotel stock. When you're
Mhm.
people to the outside neighborhoods, it hurts the people who have legitimate business who have been carrying the
Mhm.
weight for years. Okay, so
Yeah.
and then you look at the convention center, and I know you are familiar with this. They're just putting money together to do a $600 million hotel there. Uh, is that a good use of convention center money, which is a 12% tax over there on the Memorial Convention Center? I'm not sure. I would like to see safe, secure, keep from flooding first before you spend money on anything else. And I think
Mhm.
that will affect most people. If you can sit on your porch safely, if you can drive to work without having the rain bother you and you think you're going to flood safely, those two things need to be primary before you start putting murals up and putting new hotels up where people actually can't get to work because of the flooding. We've missed some of the priorities, I think. I like the idea of the housing stock, but then how does that affect our economic class here? Okay. That's benefiting fairly well off NFL owners, teams, and corporate stuff. So I think, that you kind of got two purposes there. We like to attract the money, but maybe just make it pretty and safe and clean and stop flooding first, and then attract the other people instead of worrying about your penthouse, your floor, your executive suite, your something or other that doesn't really benefit our service-based economy as well as
Yeah. Well, if we were firing on all cylinders,
we do it.
we have, yeah, yeah. If our service people would be making a lot more money. I mean, look, we could have 10 five-star hotels.
I know.
The couple that we have, the three that we have, I know they have trouble finding five-star people to work.
I hear the
Um,
time about employees and the population that you have to pull from. A couple of friends have large restaurant groups. In fact, one of them has 2,300 employees in all his restaurants. He can't find people. He had to drop his drug testing requirement in order to get dishwashers. Okay.
yeah.
They all fit together. Okay.
Well, that weighs into how our city's dealing with youth,
Correct. But I think you
and
before, and as one of your passions
yeah.
is educating the population on a basic level. I mean, it's not everybody go to college. It's just learn to read and write and be respectful and responsible. And I think that will go a long way to bringing up the caliber of people we have for jobs.
Look, all this has to do with political outcomes versus the real outcomes. And the citizens of our city, great city, are being shortchanged in such a big way. And they have the power to fix it. And they need to ask the right questions. If some mayor stands up and says, I'm going to professionally run everything that can be professionally run, and says, and I'll handle the political side. I'll go to these events and this and that. And if a mayor decided they're going to be a regional leader because New Orleans not performing reduces the value of every company in the surrounding parishes, including the North Shore. Imagine if we had, because New Orleans is known all over the world with terms of endearment. I've met people in Italy, a guy serving pouring water in Rome. And he said, "Where are you from?" Because we're always selling New Orleans the best we can. We're being ambassadors. I know you do the same when you're traveling out of the country or even in other states. They all know, oh, New Orleans. They speak about it in romantic terms. And they don't know. One said, is it the East Coast or the West Coast? And nowhere in the South Coast. They don't know Louisiana. They know New Orleans. So we have this image and this reputation. It's a shame we're being managed so poorly. And it's been for a long time. Okay. We're not pointing any fingers. I'm pointing fingers to why are we doing this in our culture? And we just running out of gas. We're running it until it's broke, and then we're doing CPR on it, as the way I see it.
Well, it's funny that you say that about traveling. When you go somewhere, where are you from? You say New Orleans. Well, they kind of look. You go, the French Quarter. Yes, I know where you're from.
Yes.
You say
Yeah.
and that's interesting. But one of the statistics, we're losing population. We're losing
Yes.
because we're not doing what you had just suggested by looking at the outcomes, making things better for everybody, not just the money class or not just people who can afford to live here, but for everybody. The people that work here is more important. Uh, um, that it means a lot to stick it out. I say in the French Quarter all this time, and as we all love the city, but we need to ask more of the people. And you know what? You just can't raise your hand and complain. Raise your hand with a solution, or at least thought it through. And so that's what I try to tend to do, is come up with solutions and things that will solve problems, because we all know the problems. We've all talked about the problems. And if I have another politician come and say the problem is, or 2 weeks left in an administration, say we need a complete overhaul of the Sewage and Water Board, to a guy who was there 8 years, could have done 10% a year, have been done. Okay.
Yeah.
We need to fix things, not just point out the problems again and again.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We're good. We're good at going to parties, having a party, and elegantly restating all our problems. Everybody in the party knows, and then doing nothing about it. But how do we get so many people running for office have really not done any real jobs? And by operational. Okay, they might have been lawyers or this or that or whatever, but hands-on operations. Do they know how things work? And that's where we're failing so much in operations. Like I tell you, I can get somebody, one of the managers of one of the shipyards could come fix a whole bunch of stuff, but they'd have to be in charge. They couldn't run it politically.
Right.
So how do you break through that? You're dealing with people who don't know what you're talking about. They nod their head. Oh yeah, but they don't know. They don't know about transparency. They don't know about really value creation. Risk management, all the skills that entrepreneurs, self-made entrepreneurs have, they're just not there. So what do you do with that?
Let's look for a way where you have the politician who is the figurehead, the lieutenant governor of the place, who goes out, promotes all the time. And then here's the person that does the business, who has the expertise to run the business, who was an engineer, was an architect, was somebody who ran something of some consequence, and let them do it. When
and leave them alone. You have to leave them alone.
Don't get in the way and start changing things. When politics first started with George Washington and all the early presidents, the beginning of the country, these were successful people, okay, that went into politics for public service. All right. And then they got out of politics and went back to being successful planners, traders, whatever they ended up doing. It's not meant to be a permanent job. It's meant.
The founders of the country did not intend to have professional politicians. Right. And look, if you look at outcome, look, if the New Orleans government managed a surgical hospital, everybody would be dead. You're married to a surgeon, and you know that, because they would make sure the right gatekeepers were there, the right people got contracts, they wouldn't care if anybody lived or died. And as long as people keep showing up, they keep dying. So I hate to be overly dramatic, but it's an analogy. And why can't we get operations right? So be interesting if any candidates will say will speak that, because in a previous interview with Greg Ray, we talked about youth issues, and Greg pretty much laid out what should be done with youth, how the city could create value by, consistent funding, by operational things, with handoffs of information, and then by encouraging nonprofits to work together on their own to create value. But I think, in talking to you, I just wanted to get a sense of how you saw things from the French Quarter, and the absolutely critical value of the French Quarter to the whole state through New Orleans. And I think you've laid it out pretty well. I think you've, if anyone wants to pick up on what you're saying and run with it, you would be glad to hear it. I'd be glad to hear it. Let's see if it happens, because the political class, behind the scenes people that pull the levers, they just like things their way, and their way is the outcomes that we've had so far. And they should be ashamed of themselves, actually, but they're not shameable. They're not shameable. They sitting in a position of power and authority, and that's it. You can't shame them. So I just, we need to keep our fingers crossed. Our pie is indeed shrinking. You mentioned something. The numbers I have, I don't know if they're accurate. We will when we get a census, but that we've lost about 25,000 people since 2020. That means there's fewer of us paying for the $1.8 billion city budget. And what are we getting for it? What can we show for it? Other than a lot of happy political class. I'm sorry, say that.
The shit you talked about, but
yeah,
what can we show for it? It's actually 4.2% loss of population, and so I think that's considerable. We lost population after Katrina. It's built back to a degree, but we're still we're under 400,000 people, and we had 650,000 people at one point in New Orleans area. So it's challenging, we'll say that, but I mean you can't give up, Laney. You know that.
Oh no, that's why we're here. Okay, but if I get, look, I realize this can be a long shot trying to get the right questions and trying to get voter awareness. But I couldn't live it myself if I didn't try.
No.
And
doing this and asking questions and bringing up topics, and we have to continue to do that. Maybe we shame them, maybe we don't, maybe we change things, maybe we don't, but it won't happen if you don't try. Okay, so I what you're doing, and I'm going to tell you again, we're not as good as we could be, and better than we think we are.
Yeah, no, that's true. And look, I have some just to give you a little preview for upcoming shows. I have a few things. I've looked up the actual. I have bullshit, actual dictionary definition. I have gaslighting, a dictionary definition. I have obfuscate.
That's good.
And I have gatekeeper, and I have pandering. Do these things ring any bells?
What? I'm hearing tinnitus right now. They're ringing all over the place. Pandering. We have politicians that pander all the time. When somebody's running, when they start legislation that panders to one group or the other. It may not be this year, but they're coming up. That's the obfuscate is bureaucracy begetting bureaucracy. So you never can figure out where the end result is. And that's on purpose. I kind of say.
Look, I like the way you say it, because you went to Jesuit and I went to Salafouche in Galliano, so I mean, thanks, that helps. But, for pandering, we have to gain approval or favor by telling little lies. That's one of the definitions. I think it's a good one, but we're going to be, I just want to do a workshop on the principles in effect. And, you really can't blame the politicians, the professional ones, because that's all that they see. It's all that they know. So all we can do is unelect them, and That's all we
True,
can do.
but you know, I'm kind of doing some research, as I said before, about the sanitation issue and contract that will hopefully be rebid, and I think that a community resident-based group that kind of oversees will put a little thumb on the scale in favor of getting something done. Okay, rather than just another, hey, let's have a manager for the manager to manage the manager. We don't need that anymore. We need some people who are walking around who actually experience it and have no axe to grind, nothing to gain from it other than better outcomes. So I think maybe that should be part of the process. Have a civilian group, okay, that helped as it went along.
Yeah. Well, people that just want a better city.
That it is in other communities where they do this in best practices for sanitation in particular. So I'm coming up with my list of suggestions to do better. So
Yeah. We'll take them. Well, and you guys have done a good job, because the first time I've seen getting the reaction on the console on a topic which is important. The other little, this is related to this, but don't you wonder? You asked me a question, put up a hypothetical. If you cross the border to, Plaquemines, St. Bernard, Jefferson, why do things change so much, on a little line? You're 100 feet over here and you're 100 feet over there, and life is way different. Okay. Because I remember talking to Mitchell Godet when he moved from Orleans to St. Bernard, and I was in his first place near the boundary. And I asked him why. He said, "Man, it's just hard being in Orleans." And I said, "You mean?" Oh, so we're looking at the border of the parishes. I said, "You mean a lot of stuff changes right there to the line?" He said, "Yes, it does."
well, it's the Jefferson Parish. You can tell that immediately. You can watch the project start, and then not a whole lot of time, the project gets finished, or it gets repaved, or it gets
Yeah.
painted. It doesn't sit with cones around it for months. I have tons of examples of that happening, and it's unfortunate. We have accepted it for so long. I think that's the status quo, and that's the problem.
And that's why we tired of this shit.
Correct. There you go.
And but our good people accept it when they shouldn't. They have to know that things aren't like this in other places. And they need to just, and the other thing we need is Team New Orleans to come together. I say when you're bailing a boat, there's no rank. You're a bailer, and I'll be disappointed if more like race politics shows up and all this. We are New Orleanians, and we all in the same boat. And I picked that up talking to a lot of people that I've interviewed that we're going to feature on this later. I interviewed a bunch of people at Jazz Fest who work for Jazz Fest, and it was very interesting. And then also did interviews with a bunch of people on Mother's Day at Cafe du Monde in City Park. So we got some very interesting stuff, but there's a convergence. There's a convergence in that a lot of people are tired of it. The ones who can, or the ones we talked about, they have opportunities and they go elsewhere. And and I'm concerned about things that make us more like a third world country. I'm really, really concerned about that. That lowers the standard for everybody. And if there is a third world country factor that's going on in New Orleans, there are a lot of forces are not dealing with youth, are not having opportunities because we don't have critical mass. And then we have more and more parties that, a lot of rich people come in and have the party and don't stay and don't leave much behind. And in our short-term thinking, but it's our political outcomes are at the root of all of it, and not real world outcomes. So let's do our best. And look, I appreciate I think what you've done is a great tutorial, a wonderful little bit of education about the influence of the French Quarter and its role. And I hope the other talks are this interesting. I hope so. And look, you can come back. We can come back as the election goes, because maybe we'll get somebody running for office saying, you know what? I'd rather have this fixed. Look, I know the only thing I know of recently was State Rep Felicia Boyd put some legislation up at the state to change things a little bit with the RTA, because sewage and water boards one I know more about, but the RTA also professionally, politically run, is not helping the citizens of the city. So we got a long way to go, and it's going to be a long slog. And I think we need more in the shovel. We need a shit excavator, a shit cavator, which is
Right.
something real big.
Maybe a plunge.
Anyway,
A plunge.
yeah, it's got to have a big diesel engine. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you very much for doing this, Laney. I appreciate that, and hopefully all of your efforts will coalesce to something bigger that will engage our community, engage our residents, not necessarily in the quarter, but the entire city. This is a city thing. It just seems to be the nexus of everything is in the French Quarter in one way or the other. But I appreciate what you're doing, and this is an effort that I'll help you in any way that I can.
You and I are shareholders of the city, along with everybody who lives in New Orleans, and we got to take our city back from this shit. Thank you, Glade, and we'll be in touch. Stay tuned. See ya.
All right. Bye-bye.
Fantastic to hear from Glade. When in political terms, the French Quarter just has a few voters. So it's like, oh, let's not bother with that. And also I have to make the observation, you can shoot some tourists, you can hit them in the back of the head and kill them, and they keep coming back. But again, I wouldn't count on that for too much longer. We need to do more and more to keep that area clean and safe, and do things like paint the curbs maybe, and stop cars from parking illegally, and like put up some street lights, change some bulbs, stuff like that. I mean, when the place looks safe, more people show up, and more people show up, then others show up, and people feel safer, and they actually are safe. So at some point we have to consider what we have to do to stop the value destruction cycle, which has been going on all over the city, and it has been evident in the French Quarter. We got some lipstick with the Super Bowl, but those resources aren't around forever, and we're going to have to change our outcomes, and we need to look at some real world outcomes on the French Quarter, and maybe provide some autonomy and some resources. But again, there's a lot at stake, and I think we got a very good outline of what's going on and what we could do to make things better from Glade. So again, let's look in the mirror, look at our friends, and ask if we tired of this shit or not. So I will see you guys next episode. Thank you. Take care.
This has been a BAM Network production.